Well, happy Monday, everyone. Alyssa Orange alongside Mike Irwin, and it is time for Ask Mike. So we're going to jump right into it. Mike, let's get a COVID update.
Man, I'm looking forward to the time when we don't do these COVID updates. I'll make an executive decision when I've decided it's no longer valid, but obviously we've still got to talk about it. It's better this week than it was last week. Last week, I think they canceled 4 of 7 games in the SEC. This week, past Saturday, all 7 of 8 were played, so there was only 1 cancellation. So that's at least progress. Not so good news for Arkansas in that they obviously COVID issues probably played a big part in them losing a game that I think they could have won otherwise if they hadn't had COVID. So that was a problem in the LSU game. Sam Pittman just had a Zoom interview earlier today in which he said, we're going to play the Missouri game, but we've still got about the same numbers that we had last week.
Numbers so that haven't been better.
Yeah, so they're going to have similar problems, especially on defense, trying to win this football game. We'll see if they can do it. Now, there is expected to be a major reshuffling of the schedule, the SEC football schedule, announced tomorrow. And all of this is an attempt to deal with all of these games that got postponed and pushed back to the end of the year, and how do you make them play, arrange it where everybody can play. And we're speculating here, but the word is that Arkansas, which is scheduled to play Alabama on the 5th, that would be the week after the Missouri game, that game might end up being postponed for Arkansas. They would have an open date on the 5th so that Alabama could make up their game with LSU. And then if that happens, they would play, Arkansas and Alabama would play on the 12th, and then the next week Alabama plays in the SEC championship game. So that's what we think will happen, and there'll be other arrangements for other teams, but this is an attempt to play as many of these games as possible that were postponed. So we'll see how that works out. Now, basketball last week, I said basketball season started last week. I just ding, 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 went into la-la land. And it's actually this week that basketball starts for Arkansas. Wednesday, the women play Oral Roberts at 11 o'clock in Bud Walton. And then the men will come back, I think, 6:30 and play Mississippi Valley State. So, and here's the good news. Eric Musselman said a few days ago, because I read this, I think it was on Twitter, that most of his players have already had COVID and have gone through it and are okay. So that's good news for playing games because it's already affected Ole Miss.
It's affected a lot of college basketball. That's like the thing right now with college basketball. I think Tennessee shut down practice as well. Rick Barnes got COVID-19 tested positive.
Okay, well, Ole Miss is the first one to, and they didn't postpone games. They flat canceled the first 4 games of the year. They're shut down right now, and they won't play, I got it down here somewhere, until December 7th. So that's quite a pushback. And it'll eliminate 4 games right off the top of their schedule. So basketball, you know, will be an issue with some teams, obviously. COVID, I think, is going to turn out to be a bigger problem with the general public now than it was back when football started because of the way this thing is spreading, especially indoors a lot. So we'll see. As far as the crowds, right now, Arkansas is set to have a limit of 4,000. Tennessee also has 4, and then the other SEC teams start. There's 2 or 3 of them that have 3, and then it drops all the way down to 2. So Arkansas will have the largest crowd right now. This situation gets worse. You might have the various states where these schools are located could step in and say no. It could even get to the point where they don't want anybody in there. So we just don't know what's going to happen with basketball crowds.
Yeah, Florida's another school that canceled their 4 games because I remember looking to see what 4 they were to make sure it didn't mess with that Florida State game.
Florida has done that too. The only one I saw was Ole Miss.
Yeah.
But Arkansas is lucky.
But it shows you, that it's already affecting basketball.
It's already started with basketball.
Yeah. All right. Our first question this week comes from Pork Soda, who asks, what underclassmen have gotten playing time this year that you expect to be difference makers next year?
Okay, well, let's start off with actual starters from this year who contributed. I mean, if you're a starter, you contributed, and you're an underclassman, and you'll be back next year. So let's take a look. Here, we'll start with the offense, and Traylon Burks right off the bat. I mean, we know what he did. He was a sophomore this year, so he's coming back. Brady Latham, a redshirt freshman left guard, he's back, and he was a starter. Ricky Stromberg, sophomore center, he's back. Noah Gatlin, redshirt sophomore right tackle. Those are all offensive linemen that are going to be back with experience this year as starters who are back next year. So that's good news. And I think they're going to go after maybe a grad transfer on the offensive line, so that'll help too. Now let's look at the defense. Eric Gregory's a redshirt freshman defensive end, one of the guys that's had to sit out this past week. He's important, and he'll be back. Isaiah Nichols, a redshirt sophomore defensive tackle. Hudson Clark, a freshman cornerback. Greg Brooks, a sophomore nickelback, and Reed Bauer, a sophomore punter. Now that's 10 guys, 10 underclassmen that will be back next year as starters. There's 3 more junior starters that would be seniors next year. And then keep in mind that anybody that's a senior this year that wants to come back can. So I think there's 4 or 5 other starters who are seniors, maybe more than that. So we may end up with a situation where this was a very young football team this year. A whole lot of sophomores, redshirt freshmen, and even true freshmen like Hudson Clark started this year, and they won't be nearly as inexperienced next year and could be loaded at the top with upperclassmen. So this is one of the reasons, Hog fans, I'm pretty optimistic about this team getting a lot better next year. They're just going to be a lot more experienced than they were, especially along the offensive line.
Yep. All right. Orlando Hog wants to know, based on the DB play against LSU, will Odom go with a more seasoned DB, or will he stick with the freshman DB?
Well, I assume he's asking about Hudson Clark.
Yeah.
Now, look, the kid is a true freshman, starting in the SEC.
As a walk-on.
As a former walk-on.
Well, he's not.
Yeah, he's a walk-on right now. He's supposedly going to get a
Yes.
scholarship.
Yes.
This is what happens to freshmen who start in the SEC. You're going to be up and down. He's had some good games. He's had some games when he struggled. His backup is also a freshman. And then the backup on the other side, the other cornerback, if they moved him over there, he's a redshirt freshman. So it's not like there's some bunch of experienced guys sitting there behind him. That's part of the issue that this team has right now. So there's a reason why they started this kid. He did some things early on and looked pretty good, and I think they realized that other teams might be picking on him a little bit. He's a little bit undersized. They put some tight ends on him on purpose. But he wouldn't be out there playing if he was not their best option at that position. So do I expect them to change this week? No. I don't. Why would you change one inexperienced player for a guy that's even more inexperienced?
Makes a good point. All right, Parallax Pick says, considering Mark Kurla's history with Arkansas, wouldn't you think the SEC office would want to keep him away from an Arkansas game?
Let me just say that if I were Mark Kurlas, I wouldn't want to do an Arkansas game. It wouldn't be a matter of Arkansas saying, hey, we don't want this guy. I would be saying, I don't want to do it, because he claims that every time this happens and he's tied to some kind of controversy, that Arkansas fans drive him nuts by, they've got his phone number apparently, and they leave voice messages, they text him. You know, they email.
I think he's like a financial advisor, and they have like work phone.
Yeah.
I saw that getting passed around on Twitter.
So they're doing all this to him. The word, and I don't remember back then, but I guess this is right. I've certainly read this, that Bobby Petrino was so mad at him after the 2009 game, and Kurlas and I think the whole crew got suspended for a call that they made in the Arkansas-Florida game, and so. You know, I think Petrino got so mad that he somehow had enough pull to make sure that Kurlas never did another game while he was here. But I guess when Petrino left, whoever came in after that, who was that after Petrino? Was it John L?
And then Brett.
And then Brett Bielema. So I guess they didn't care anymore.
Matter anymore.
I don't remember much about him until this came up. So look, here's what I would say about Kurlas. I'm not going to defend him. A lot of Hog fans just want to run him out of officiating. To me, the problem right now that I see is not with on-the-field officials. You can make a ruling on the field, and these guys are having to call these things in real time. A targeting call. Did this guy recover a fumble? And there's everybody's piled on there, and you can't see under there. So you can't see things that can be seen on a review. Now, I sat around as a college football fan for 40 years or so going, because you'd watch games and you'd see a replay and you saw that refs really blew a call, but there was nothing you could do about it. And I was one of the ones that said, come on, let's do a review. Well, we got it. And you know what? In the SEC, it doesn't seem to matter. And it's not just Arkansas. My theory is that these guys in the booth and the guys back in Birmingham don't want to make their on-the-field officials look bad. So if there's any sort of way they can go ahead and uphold the call that's already there, they'll do it. And I think that's what happened on these two calls. Now, were they wrong? Sure they were wrong. Here's the thing that's frustrating. When a TV booth analyst who's sitting there and looks at a replay, and 6 seconds into that relay goes, well, there's Fouché on the ball. You can see it under his stomach, and then look, he puts his hands around it and starts to get up with it. That's a recovery. When they talk about the targeting, look at the way he turns his body. Catalan turns his body away from the guy. He's trying to avoid targeting. He doesn't hit him with the shoulder pads. He doesn't hit him with the helmet. Kind of hits him with his ribs. So to me, it's an example of a kid trying to avoid targeting. So how they came up with that, I don't know. To me, Otis Kirk wrote a thing about this, and I agree. I think at the end of the year, they need to sit down and review this process and figure out what they're doing wrong, because it's not just happening to Arkansas. Right now, to me, the video review is worthless.
Yeah.
You know, there's no point
Why
to
do it if you're not going to get it right? And you have to feel bad for Joe Fouché, because he's the one who recovered the ball at Auburn. And you've now got two sets of referees who say that there's no clear recovery of a football. And Joe Fouché's like, what else am I supposed to do to show that I'm recovering the football? Twice now for the poor kid. Got to feel for him. Jumpity asks, what are your thoughts on Kendall Briles' play calling this year? You know,
you sit here with me. I sometimes am scratching my head like, what's he doing there?
I think I asked Jumpity to ask you this question.
Here's the thing that I see from a lot of the fans, and I understand where they're coming from. It's like they think, a lot of people feel like that Kendall gets away from what's working. You know, they have a drive, they go down the field, they score, and then he forgets what they were doing to score because he wants to do something new. What have we seen in the last couple of games? Oh, they're running that little option now, and it's never worked. I'm sorry, I guess that's not what Felipe Franks does. He doesn't seem to make the right decisions or whatever. Not just anybody can run the option, so that's a waste. They just run plays that, to me, they don't work, and you ask, why is he doing that? I mean, they were doing this other stuff on the previous drive. However, I just want to say that we can't lay what went on in the LSU game entirely on Kendall Briles, because Sam Pittman told Tara Talmadge at halftime that we need to run the ball more. Now, to me, what he should have said was, we need to run the ball more successfully. They did need to run the ball more, but they needed it to work. And the problem was running the ball wasn't working. Mainly, it looked like to me, Traylon Smith, because Rakeem Boyd was out, somehow he got into Boyd's role. Boyd's more of an off-tackle guy, take off, bulldoze your way through the middle, and Traylon's been more of a attack the corners guy. And it was almost like they took him and stuck him in that other role, and I mean, LSU was stopping him. So there's that. Look, here's the thing about Sam Pittman. I know this enough from when he was the offensive line coach here. He likes bully ball. He wants to get big offensive linemen and knock the defense out of the way and just push you. Doesn't mean he won't throw it, but he wants to run it first. And I think he wants to do that right now in certain situations, and it's not always possible, because the frustrating thing right now, these last two games, what's worked? Chunk plays through the air. The best thing about this offense is Felipe Franks' arm, and you got a couple of receivers, Mike Woods and Traylon Burks, that can get past the defense, and so he's throwing bombs. The problem is that you're scoring quick and you're sticking your defense back out on the field. They have a hard time using their pass game to kind of go down the field in a 12-play drive instead of a 2-play drive. So it's a real dilemma. But I also think there were some things with LSU. They had extra time to prepare, and I think that was part of the issue too. They knew what Arkansas was doing.
All right, King Kong wants to know, would Arkansas get more league respect in the Big 12? I feel like we get a Big 12 question all the time.
We do, and this is, again, part of this video review thing, because every time that happens, well, this conference doesn't like us, they hate us, let's leave. Yes, Arkansas would get more respect, and here's why. Because the Big 12 is really the Big 10 in football. They have 10 teams. So if they could get another one like Arkansas, and then maybe pluck a team out of the Big
Like
Ten
Nebraska.
or even
Nebraska back, or-
Pac-10, you know, pull Colorado back in or somebody like that. Maybe somebody out of the Big Ten, out of the ACC. I don't know how they do it, but if they could get 2 more teams and Arkansas one of them, that would really help them. So yeah, they would be nice to Arkansas. I don't know if it'd be permanent. It would create these cool rivalries with Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, and be right here, and you could drive, and everybody'd be excited and get mad at each other. But it's just not going to happen. You can sit here and talk all day long about what would it be better. But Arkansas is not leaving this league. It's the best league in college football. You make the most money. The answer is still what I keep saying. You've got to get better, and I think they are. And when you get better, you will get more respect.
Yeah. And it's not just about football. You got to look at all the sports.
Yeah,
too.
because they are
Basketball
good.
and
And
baseball and
Arkansas is. You
all
take football out of the mix over the last several years, and Arkansas is about as good as it comes overall athletically with all the various sports.
Yeah. All right, Delta Boy asks, what's the deal with the O-line? They looked horrible in the run block against LSU.
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit. When you give somebody 3 weeks to get ready for you, they're going to look at every single thing you've done. They're going to know your game plan. It looked like to me that there were a lot of times when Arkansas snapped the ball, and at the first movement, whatever it was like LSU was all over it. You know, if you throw a little swing pass, they already had guys out there. It was like they were waiting for you. And I just think that they were, you know, they had so much study time to study the offense and then work at it on the practice field. It made it a lot harder for Arkansas's offense. So I wouldn't blame the O-line. I just think, first of all, that was the strength of LSU's defense anyway, was their defensive front. It was their secondary that was the problem going into the game. And that was where they had problems. So to criticize them because of the lack of the running game, I think you're not taking into a lot of consideration a lot of things that were true before that game even started.
All right. Some are saying that LSU faked COVID numbers in order to not play Alabama so that they could have an extra time to prepare for Arkansas. Is there any proof of that?
Well, of course not. It is a conspiracy theory. There's a lot of them out there right now. Here's why some people think that. You had this open date for LSU before they played Alabama. And then on Monday of the Alabama game, Ed Orgeron comes out and says, oh, we don't have enough guys, we're not playing. If he had left it at that, might not have been raising eyebrows. But then he made this statement, we're already working against Arkansas, and acted like they had been, which would indicate they were the week before. And then when some of these player interviews started popping up, we get them and then we pass them along to the viewers. That's what they were saying. Oh, we're going to be a lot better. We've had a lot of time to prepare. And
they said the minute we knew we weren't playing Alabama. Okay, well, when exactly was that?
When exactly did you know that?
Yes.
And that's what's fueled this conspiracy thing, where Ed Orgeron, put yourself in his shoes. Okay, they're already mad at him because he won a national championship last year, and at that point, they were sitting there in 6th place in the SEC West, one from the bottom, so he's looking terrible. And then the team that is last beat the LSU, that's Mississippi State. And then he has all that stuff come out with these rape allegations where it's not that it's that apparently there was evidence that they didn't even investigate some of these things. That was the problem there. Not that you're just trying to automatically accuse somebody without evidence, but that you didn't investigate it. So this makes him look really bad. So you got to have something positive happen. And so again, this is part of the conspiracy theory. He looks and goes, aha, I can cancel this Alabama game, and I can spend all this time working against Arkansas, and we'll win, and everybody will like me again. Well, the problem is they still got to play Alabama, so I don't know what's going to happen with Ed, but you can never prove something like this, because how do you prove that they just put somebody under quarantine that really didn't come into contact with somebody on their team that had COVID? Sure. How would you prove that? I mean, the only way would be if the player himself says, I faked that.
Yeah. Didn't we talk about one time that all the SEC kids were getting chips? Couldn't you go back and look at their chip and then say, oh, look, that data, you weren't anywhere near that?
I don't know if that happened, chips.
I say chips. Remember the little, like, like wristband things they would be wearing?
Maybe, yeah. But anyway, you're never going to know the answer
Yeah.
to that. You can believe that conspiracy theory if you want.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
Sure.
There's a conspiracy theory
you
that
don't
Mark
have any-
Curlis hates Arkansas. And,
You don't have any basketball questions in here. How excited are you for basketball season to start on Wednesday?
well, based on that red-white game, it looked like to me he's got like a whole lot of shooters.
Yeah.
I was impressed. I've sat here for years and watched Arkansas bong, shoot, bong. There's usually one or two guys like Mason Jones that can drain anything, and then everybody else is just bong. And this was like everybody that was shooting and 50% from the floor. They got a bunch of three-point shooters. They're a bigger team this year. I'm anxious to watch these guys because I think they're going to be pretty good. And then we've already got protection, we know, on the NCAA basketball tournament because the NCAA announced last week that they're going to play all the games in a bubble, which will protect a lot of money. This, there's been questions this week about Arkansas's field for the LSU game. Why did it look so terrible? Wake up, people. They had one of the best turf management people in the country, and they had to essentially lay him off. They retired him and gave him a good package, but they're trying to cut costs. And if you're having to do that, that indicates how serious. I was told that Arkansas had to borrow like $12 or $13 million to get through the academic year. They're hopeful they can make it up next year, but they've got to get fans back in there.
Yeah.
And so to be able to play in the NCAA basketball tournament and get that revenue, that's going to help.
Yeah.
And then we need to get this vaccine, people. And don't sit around and tell me that if you're a sports fan, don't say, I'm not taking it. This is a way for you to get back into the games. So, it's not, I don't believe these conspiracy
What does a
theories.
missed shot sound like again?
Boing.
And for that, that's going to do it for Ask Mike. Alyssa Orange, Mike Irwin. We'll see you next week.